Hi, I'm Laura Candler, and I am very excited to be able to share with you today powerful strategies for building math vocabulary. Let's go ahead and get started. First, for those who are not familiar with me, who don't know me, as I said, my name's Laura Candler, and you might want to get to know a little bit about me before you spend the next hour or so with me. I think the most important thing about me is that I was a classroom teacher for 30 years. I retired a few years ago. I love teaching, and I love being able to connect and share with educators now and share ideas about things that worked really well for me in the classroom. I did receive my national board certification. I have a master's degree in elementary education, and a number of years ago, I was a recipient of a Milken Educator Award in North Carolina, where I live, so that was a high honor. You may know me from my website, Teaching Resources, which is at lauracandler.com, or my blog, corkboardconnections.com. I've had my website for quite a while. I started it when I was in the classroom, and it was just a way to share strategies with other teachers. When something works really well for me, I just want to go out and share it. And, maybe it'll work for you too. I want you to have the same, experience that I had. And so I came up with the idea of having an online file cabinet, and I would create PDF files of the things that were working well for me. And then as time went on, blogging came about. Yeah, my website was actually before blogs. It was quite a while ago that I started. It really didn't look anything like this. But the blog was a way to give more detail and maybe be a little bit more personal about some of the things that I was doing. And then I started on Facebook with my Teaching Resources Facebook page as a way of connecting with other educators, since I love sharing ideas. And I have several Facebook groups, private Facebook groups that I'll tell you about later. And I'm on Pinterest and Instagram. So those are all places that hopefully we can connect. Okay, moving on, I did want to let you know that I'm going to be sharing a lot of freebies in this webinar, a lot of resources that will be helpful at the end of after we go through the presentation, some things that will help you implement these ideas. So I'm going to give you the link to that page at the end of the webinar. So just stay tuned and hang in there, and pretty much anything that I show you, if it's free, that's where you're going to be able to find it at the end. So you might be wondering, are you in the right place for the next hour or so? Is this going to be useful to you? So let's go through a couple of scenarios, and if you can connect with any of these, then you are definitely in the right place. So maybe your students struggle with the complex language of math, and you'd like to learn some fun and effective strategies to foster vocabulary growth. Maybe you already know, like, my kids really have trouble with math terminology, but I want to make it fun. I don't want it boring. Maybe you want to know how to make your lessons more fun without adding a lot of fluff to them. And I'm going to be able to show you lots of ways to do that can be used in not just math, but in other subject areas. Maybe you need time-saving strategies that are going to reduce instead of increase your paperwork load. And the things that I'm going to share with you today will actually reduce your paperwork load, because you're going to be learning some cooperative learning activities and other strategies that will definitely reduce that paperwork load. I also want to let you know that it's possible that you could get professional development credit for this webinar. It's sort of a do-it-yourself model. I have a professional development certificate on that freebies page at the end, and it's actually set up to where you can take a number of different webinars and watch presentations and total up your hours, and then submit the form to your administrator if he or she will accept it. So the first thing you should do is participate in the webinar. I'll show you about the handouts in a minute. Take notes, and then check with your administrator to see if perhaps they would count this for professional development credit. So that's going to be on that freebies page too. So here's exactly what you're going to be learning. Why you should spend time teaching math vocabulary, how to power up any activity to make it more effective and to foster vocabulary development, 4 phases of math vocabulary development, and I'll be sharing specific games, activities, and strategies for each phase. You have a set of webinar notes that you are going to want to download and use with this presentation. If you don't have them with you now, you might want to stop and check your confirmation email for a link to those handouts, and then come right back here, because these handouts are organized so that you can follow along with the presentation and you'll have a place to take notes. Okay, I guess one of the first things to think about is, why should we teach math vocabulary? You know, you think about math, it's numbers. So what is this about math vocabulary? But really, if you stop to think about it, pretty much everywhere your students have trouble, it really, in math, it almost always comes down to the vocabulary. Well, maybe with your times tables and things like that, there are some fluency issues, but after you get past the fluency issues, it really comes down to having an understanding of the vocabulary that go with certain concepts. And in fact, I would say that the ability to read, write, and speak the language of math is essential for that mathematical concept development and mastery. Because if you think about it, if you don't have the words for the concepts, you can't think about the concepts. It's like those two are so intertwined and they're so important. And when your kids are having trouble really grasping things at the conceptual level, a lot of times it's because they don't have the vocabulary they need to talk about it or even to think about it. So this is really essential. So we're going to start off with a game, and a lot of you know about this game probably. It's called Guess My Number, but let me just run through the directions. And I have a point to this game, so just kind of bear with me and play along, and then I'll get to my point in a minute. So with Guess My Number, the leader thinks of a number and the other players try to guess what it is by asking yes/no questions. So they might say, is the number odd? Is it a multiple of 4? Is it greater than 30? These are examples of yes/no questions. Now, to have a full understanding of the game, you kind of need to play it. So I would like us to do this game, and just so we can see it in action. So I've written down a number between 1 and 100. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a series of questions on the next slide that are sort of pretending that I have an imaginary class. And I'm the teacher, and I'm playing this as the leader against my class, and they're going to be asking me questions. And so I'm going to go through those. But what I want you to do is, while I'm doing this, I want you to think about it yourself and kind of play along with me. And if you take a look at your handout, there's actually a place for you. When you think you know that number, I want you to write it down. So let's imagine that the first question from the class is it an even number? So I'm going to say, no, it's not an even number. Is it less than 50? Yes, it's less than 50. Is it a multiple of 3? Yes, it's a multiple of 3. Okay, is it a single digit number? No, it's not a single digit number. Is it greater than 30? Yes, it is. Okay, if you think you know it, write it on your paper. If you're not sure, wait for another clue. Are both digits the same? No, both digits are not the same. So by now we should be getting a little bit closer. Is it a multiple of 5? Yes, it is a multiple of 5. Now, the number is 45. Now, that was, you know, as a game goes, many of you may know this game, and you may think, well, that's a really great game to play in math. But the way I just played it and demonstrated, it's really not such a great game if you think about it. Because if you think about if this was going on in your classroom, you know, by the second question, half your kids would have tuned out on it. You know, if you were just like in front of the class, just playing it on the whiteboard or whatever. By the end, probably only 10% of the kids would be hanging in there if you were just doing it the way I played it, with just firing questions one after another. Even if you told the kids, okay, raise your hand when you have a question, and there's going to be a lot of kids that are not engaged. So that's actually not all that great of an activity. So what I want to do is take a look at that activity and talk about how can we power it up? How can we make that more powerful to increase the engagement and to foster vocabulary development? But it's actually a bigger picture than that, because I want to share with you some ideas that I've had kind of exploring this a little bit lately about how we can power up any learning game. And I started thinking about, what's like a really great lesson that I've taught? And then maybe what are some lessons that I've taught that aren't that great? And I realized that for me anyways, it comes down to two qualities. How rigorous is the activity is one thing. You need it to be rigorous. So like, do you have an activity that makes kids think? Is it challenging? And does it involve higher level thinking, such as strategizing or analyzing? If you've got those things going on, and there's lots of other ways to make it rigorous too, but those are just some samples, then that's one part of it being a powerful activity. But I found in my classroom that another piece was needed, and that is it really needed to be fun for the kids. So is it a game or is it similar to a game? That makes it more fun. Are they actively engaged? Are they moving, talking, manipulating materials? And then I guess the key thing is, would they want to do the activity if they had a choice? And I'm going to show you a variation of Guess My Number that I used with my students called Mystery Number, which I later developed even more to Mystery Number Detectives, that they love so much. This was 5th grade. They loved so much that they didn't even want to go outside and play sometimes when we were playing this game because they were so caught up in it. It was a math game. So if you have those things going on, something's rigorous, something's fun, then it's usually pretty powerful. And I'd like to just do a quick visual for you to help you think through it, or to share with you, I guess, what I was thinking. I like to think about rigor being on a scale of, if you look at this square, the dark blue area, something's more rigorous, the light area is less rigorous. And if you look at fun in a box this way, so that an activity that's more fun is on the far right, less fun is on the far left, and then you overlay those, you kind of come up with a matrix. And if you think about blue and yellow making green, I kind of like, this is sort of how I pictured it in my mind. And there's like 4 types of activities dealing with how rigorous or how fun they are. So in the lower left corner, if something's less fun and less rigorous, it's not really going to be that great of an activity. And that would be like just skill drill, worksheets. Not fun, not very rigorous. Now, something might not be very fun, but maybe it's more rigorous. Maybe it's brain teasers, or maybe it's, like test practice activities. They're not fun, but they are rigorous, and there's probably going to be some learning going on, but not the most. Sometimes you have activities that are really fun, but they're not that rigorous. And that comes in when you do something like a science activity or a math activity where, it's an experiment, the kids are having a blast, they love it, but then the next day you ask them what they learned, or you ask them to write in a journal, and they can't even tell you what they learned. Like, totally missed the point of the activity. I'm telling you, that happened to me so many times before I figured out that having something be fun didn't necessarily mean that the kids were going to be learning from it. So over the years, I kind of figured out that in order for something to be a really powerful activity and the kids to learn a lot and get a lot, it needs to have some like engaging qualities to it, but it also has to be rigorous and challenging and something that really makes them think. So I've been kind of applying that to not just math, but other areas too. And this really seems to play out. So let's see if it works for you too. Let's take a look at the game Guess My Number and take those power up strategies and ideas and the concept of powering up an activity. We're going to tweak this activity to make it more challenging and more engaging and fun. And what I did with this activity is I gave it a mystery theme. And I implemented all of these different strategies when I was teaching. These were the things that I added to the activity to make it more fun and more rigorous. So what I'm going to do is take each one of these strategies and give you some examples. And for each one, I want you to think about, is this making it more fun or making it more rigorous, or maybe both? Let's take a look. So my variation of Guess My Number is called Mystery Number Detectives, and in this particular activity the leader is not just a leader, they're the eyewitness, and they select a number from a deck of mystery number suspect cards that I made to go with the activity because it's easier to draw out a number. So these are some examples of numbers. And then the other players become detectives who conduct an investigation to find out the identity of the suspect. And so I have directions to go with that. Now, this is something that it's best to play the teacher against the class for a while, like play it once a day for a while till the kids get the hang of it, and then they can play it in centers or in teams, but I'll share with you some management strategies that will really help with that. So think about, is it fun? Giving it a mystery theme, does it make it more fun, or does it make it more rigorous, or both? So to me, it definitely makes it more fun. It's a mystery. You know, you've got your detectives, you got your eyewitness and everything, but it also makes it more rigorous because you've got this vocabulary like eyewitness and detective and suspect, and so it makes the kids have to think a little bit harder. So for this strategy, I think it's more fun and more rigorous. The next strategy is to have the players write the questions. So, you know, when I was calling out the questions a few minutes ago and showing them to you as if a class was asking me, that would be like if you just had kids raise their hand and call out questions. But then you'd lose half the class. But if you have the kids write their questions on dry erase boards, and you give them time, each time you answer a question, and you have them hold up their dry erase boards, and you look around the room, and you're the eyewitness, you choose one question at a time to answer. That's going to be more fun because kids like to write on dry erase boards, and it's more engaging because everybody's involved, nobody's bored, and it is also more rigorous because nobody can sit there just doing nothing. They have to think about what would be the next question that I need to ask that could help me figure out what the number is. The next variation that worked really well for me was to say that each student could only have one chance to guess the mystery number, because what I found was that kids would just keep guessing. Is it a 3? Is it an 8? Is it a 15? But if you say you only have one chance to guess the mystery number, and if you guess it and you're wrong, then you're out of the game, that round of the game, then it makes them think a little harder. And another tip is to get them to write the number down and give it to the leader or the eyewitness. So I created these little cards that say case solved, and you can give one to each student at the beginning of the game and tell them don't write on it right away because they'll turn them back into you if they don't happen to guess the number. But they put their name down as the detective, and then if they figure out the number, they write the number on the card. And as I said, if they're incorrect, they're out of the game for that round. Another rule I had was that students couldn't write questions in which the answer like pretty much gives away the number. So, you know, is it between 3 and 5? Okay, if I say yes, then everybody's going to know it's 4, so, you know, you couldn't do that. So, does this make it more fun? Does it make it more rigorous? Well, I would say that it makes it more rigorous because you got to really think and work harder when you know you only have one guess. But I would say it also makes it more fun because if you only have one chance, then it's like you're taking a chance. It's a risk when you raise your hand and say that you've got the number. You could be wrong. So it really adds an element of fun to it, excitement. The fourth thing is to encourage the use of precise vocabulary. And the way you can do that is to encourage creative questions that use more challenging and more precise vocabulary, especially like mathematical vocabulary. And consider limiting the number of times a math term can be used. Like in the upper grades, 4th and 5th, 6th grade, you know, don't let them use the word multiple over and over. You know, that gets used once and then that's like out. You could even have those have word wall cards up and then like cross them off, or you could have a list of allowable terms and then cross it off if it's already been used. So as far as being more creative with your questions, does it have a 7 in the ones place? Is it a single digit number? Is it a prime number? Is the number divisible by 3? Is the sum of the digits less than 12? Is the product of the digits more than so-and-so? So you're getting all of this vocabulary in there. And I'm telling you, this is really where I saw the power of this game, because the kids had to dig deep to think about what words could they use to really narrow down the questions, like pinpoint the answer. Another way to use precise vocabulary is a fraction variation of the game. And I cannot take credit for coming up with this idea, even though I'll take credit for coming up with this little game board that I think is very effective. But I was teaching mystery number in a workshop one day, and the teachers, after I introduced it to them, they were kind of brainstorming. I think it was the 5th grade teachers, like, how can we, make this even more challenging? And somebody said, oh, you could do mystery fraction. And then when they ask a question, they have to ask it about the numerator or the denominator or about the whole fraction. And I wish I had written down the person's name, because after I thought about it later, I thought that is awesome. So that really takes it to a higher level. So here's, in the game that I created, I actually made mystery fraction suspect cards so that the kids could just choose one, because I don't think I would want the kids to randomly try to come up with their own fractions. I think that could be kind of tricky. So fun or rigor? It definitely makes it more rigorous to do fractions. And, as I've said previously, for a lot of kids, making it more rigorous also makes it more fun. It may not be true for everybody, but definitely for your gifted kids, anything that's more challenging, it makes it more exciting for them. The 5th thing is to record clues on a number board. So you could just use a 100 board for this activity. And it's best to laminate them with some real heavy-duty lamination and give everybody a dry erase marker. And then after each question is answered, the detectives record clues on their number boards to help them find the identity of that mystery number suspect. So if you remember back when I was playing the game and demonstrating it for you at the beginning, one of the things that was difficult is I was calling out these questions and answering them, and unless you were furiously taking notes, you probably got lost after about the 4th or 5th question. But when the kids have a 100 board, well, let me just go ahead and show you. I came up with, in the mystery number suspect game, I have some, ones that you can use. I mean, you can just use a regular hundreds board, but I have one with 50, 100, and then to really scale it back down for younger kids, you could just do 20 mystery numbers, and it would be much easier for them. And then for them, it would be greater than, less than, or whatever, and you wouldn't have to worry about the vocabulary quite as much. But let's talk about how they would record those clues. So if somebody asks, is a mystery number suspect greater than 30? The answer is no. Then the kids would just cross off anything over 30. And then they move on to the next one. So is it a multiple of 5? If the answer is yes, then they would circle the remaining multiples of 5. And if you continue on that way, it's like it helps the kids really zero in on what kinds of questions they need to ask when they're doing this. So it makes it more fun for sure, because they're writing on those mystery number boards, but it also makes it more rigorous, because when they start crossing off the numbers and circling numbers and then they have to come up with a new question, they really have to think about what question could I ask. And the final strategy for this game is to have kids work with a partner. And you're going to assign them, and these kids will work together to discuss, like when they write new questions and the clues and game strategies and so on. And I would never allow random partners for something like this. Random partners are fun if you don't have something real challenging, and it doesn't really matter, who's partnered with whom. But in something like this, you're best to make the partners yourselves. So the H-A and A-L stands for it's best to pair a high-achieving student with an average student, and then make pairs out of your average students and your lower-performing students. And this, a lot of people think, oh, I'll put my highest student with my lowest student. That's not a good pairing because a lot of times those high students, they are impatient with the kids that don't understand it and they really don't know how to explain it. It's like, well, why don't you know this? You know, I know it. Why don't you know it? But the average student, they have to work a little bit harder. You know, they can be paired with a low student because they can say, oh, you know, I had trouble with that too, but after I learned it, this is how I think about it. And then the high students can relate to the average students a little bit better. So you're going to give each pair one dry erase board and one number board for recording the clues. And after each question is answered, encourage the players to discuss the clues with their partners. So the way you could do it is for one round of the game, one person could be writing on the 100 board or the 50, chart, and the other student could be doing the questions, or they could, flip-flop each time, but, they need to take turns with what they're doing, and they need to be discussing it all the way through. So one last time, thinking about, does it make it more fun? Does it make it more rigorous? The kids will tell you it makes it more fun because you get to talk to somebody. As far as the rigor, in many ways it does make it more rigorous because they are going to be talking and strategizing and really thinking in a different way. Now, perhaps for your highest performing students, it may not add rigor, but still sometimes just discussing it with somebody else, maybe the child sees a different perspective that they hadn't thought of. So I think in this case it really increases both. So I told you I would share some ideas for using this in cooperative learning teams or in math centers, because when you see the activity, you immediately think, oh, that's great for math centers. But there are some problems that can happen. Now, because I'm going to share with you about the problems that can happen, you will be on the lookout for them, and you probably won't have the things happen to you that happened to me. I had to learn this the hard way. First of all, you do want to play this thing as a class over and over and over till the kids really have the directions down carefully, or completely. They thoroughly understand the directions. Another thing is I made these little roll cards that there's one eyewitness for a team of 4, and there's 3 detectives. By putting these little roll cards in front of the student who's the eyewitness and then in the detectives, it kind of helps everybody focus on what their role is. The detectives get to ask questions, the eyewitness answers yes or no, and then after a round of the game is over, they swap their cards around. It sort of helps monitor their participation. Now, here's the problem with this game. If the eyewitness doesn't know the math vocabulary terms inside out, upside down, every which way, they are likely to answer a question wrong. So if the detective says, is it a prime number? And let's say it was my number 45, and they say, yes. Okay, well, 45 is not a prime number. That is going to throw off the whole rest of the game. And at the end of the game, when the eyewitness says, yeah, I tricked you, it was 45, those kids are going to want to strangle that person because they're going to say 45 is not a prime number. You didn't answer it right, and then you just about have a fist fight on your hands. I'm telling you, 5th grade, been there, done that. Like I saw it all, and I realized, okay, whoa, this, and I saw what was going on. I realized I wish I'd been able to think ahead before I saw it happen, but I could see where it would happen. So what I ended up doing is breaking it down and playing kids 2 against 2. So there's 2 eyewitnesses, 2 detectives, and then the eyewitnesses, they always consult, like let's say the detectives, they consult together about what the question is and they ask their question. Then the eyewitnesses have to kind of huddle together and say, is it a prime number? Or, they have to talk about that, and then they answer it. And that right there, like totally solved the problem. So, and then they just kind of flip-flop back and forth. As far as extending the numbers up higher or lower, like the 100 board was just a natural thing to use, and I don't think adding them higher necessarily makes it more challenging, because the kids will just start dividing it in half. Like, if you have them do it with 500, then they'll ask, is it less than 250 or whatever? But if somebody picks a number like 350, yeah, that is going to be more difficult for the kids to ask questions. So, I really never did it higher than 100, but that would certainly be another way to extend it. So these are just a few little extra pieces that I developed to go with a mystery number detectives game. I realized that some classes might not be ready for the questioning, so I came up with some multiple choice task cards that you can use with the Plickers program that can kind of help get your kids ready. I put together some word wall cards that specifically have the kinds of words that you would use in this game. It's not all math words, it's just words you would use in this game. And then I also came up with some question stems that you could cut out and put in the middle of the team, that if they don't know what kinds of questions to ask, these are like, you know, ways to differentiate little variations that can kind of help the kids at the beginning of the activity. Okay, and this is a photograph of some of the pieces and parts of Mystery Number Detectives and kind of how it looks. So this, I mean, this is if you start with this game at the beginning of the year or after a few months and you just played this game, you know, once a week, like let it be a Monday or a Friday, like warm up or whatever, you'd just be amazed at how your kids would grow. I did, when I was working on this variation, since I'm not in the classroom anymore, I like to get volunteers to test it for me, and Cassie Dahl from Teaching and Technology blog tested it out with her students, and she just said the kids loved it. And she just saw so much learning going on, and these are some of the comments that the kids had. She said, one of the kids said, do you realize that you can cut the numbers in half by just asking if it's odd or even? Why wouldn't you start with that? And I can just, you know, I can just picture like a gifted kid kind of, that's what I'm saying about the high kids, not being able to really help the lower kids, because a gifted student would see that, like, why wouldn't that be your first question? You know, either odd or even, or maybe like, you know, is it more than 50, less than 50 or whatever. And then I love coming up with questions, is really making my brain work. This was so much fun. Best game ever. Can we please play just one more round? You're talking about a math game here. So this is a pretty exciting game. Okay, so I just want to put these in front of you one more time about how to power up this game. And it's not just all about guess my number and powering it up. It's these strategies I want you to think about, like, how could you apply these strategies to other activities that you do in math or in other subject areas. So giving something a theme, you know, is going to make it more powerful. Having kids write things down. Adding some rules can make it more challenging. Always getting kids to use higher levels of vocabulary can help. You know, partners, cooperative learning, if it's done well, that can help too. So I want these to be kind of broad principles you can apply to lots of things. And one more time, the Power Up Learning Matrix is kind of how it pulls all together. Okay. Moving on to some of the, like putting all of this in action, I found this quote a couple of months ago. I don't know who said it, but it just stuck with me. And I think this is one of the reasons that I'm such a big believer in cooperative learning. If you think about it, it's so true that whoever is doing the talking is doing the learning. And when the teacher is doing all the talking in the classroom, there's probably not as much learning going on. Now, obviously, we don't mean chit-chat talking. We mean like structured talking, you know, purposeful talking. But I really think that if this is an area where maybe you're not as comfortable because you really would like the classroom to be quiet, that's something that you just have to kind of work with, and after a while you see that there's so much more learning going on that you'll realize you're okay with, you know, as long as it's not chaotic and like a deafening sound, just quiet talking is really, it can be productive. So as I was putting the presentation together, I really wanted to organize all of the information I had to share. So I kind of started thinking about, like, how is it that kids learn math vocabulary? And I settled on these 4 phases of math vocabulary development. And I'm not going to cite a source because the source is me. I mean, it's just kind of like my way of thinking through it. It just helps me to understand more about how I'm teaching and to be more intentional when I think about things in a more organized way. So these are the phases, and I'm going to go through each one and share some strategies. So the first thing is, it's kind of that awareness phase that there's new math vocabulary out there, like either through direct instruction, and then maybe putting up a word wall card, hands-on lessons, exploratory activities, real-world experiences, kind of like in this activity where the kids were measuring the pumpkin. I asked parent volunteers to send in I ended up getting like one per team of different sizes. And we did an activity where they were getting the diameter, the circumference, they were weighing it, estimating the seeds and all of, the number of seeds and all of that. And so they're learning, they're being exposed to new vocabulary in an activity like that. And I just finished a new product, word wall cards, editable word wall cards that you could use for this. I mean, you can make your own word wall cards simply by cutting up strips of paper, but this makes it really easy because it's just kind of some fun backgrounds and fonts and things, so that as you're teaching lessons, you can create word wall cards and put them on cabinet doors or the actual wall and have them for kids to refer to throughout the math lesson. The next phase is deepening understanding, and that's where you're talking and writing about math using graphic organizers, sorting words and concepts, and exploring models. And these are two things that you can find on my blog, Corkboard Connections, and I'll tell you a little bit about those activities in a moment here. So this one is called Build a Decimal. Even in 5th grade, I think that manipulatives are really important, like base 10 blocks. When I first started teaching, I really didn't, I just thought that was for little kids. And I don't know where I learned it, probably in a workshop somewhere or from a fellow teacher. But when introducing decimals, just like when introducing whole numbers, say in 2nd or 3rd grade, or some concepts, having the base 10 blocks really makes it real for the kids. And so I have a little strategy, and I explain it in the blog post, where each student on the team is responsible for one type of manipulative, like one person is in charge of the little hundredths, cubes, not cubes, units. One person in charge of the rods, the flats, the cubes, and so on. And then you have put a card out in front of the kids, and then they have to build it on a place value mat. They have to write it. They have to do the expanded form. Like, it's a whole lesson that you go through, that you're guiding the kids through and introducing that vocabulary and, kind of helping them make it real. I like to start with the flat and tell the kids, you've been thinking of this as being 100 until you came to like 4th grade or 5th grade, because I taught both. But it's just a piece of plastic, and there's nothing magic about it that it means 100. That's just what we've said that it means. But today we're going to talk about this plastic flat square as being one whole unit. This is now going to be one. And I said, pretend that there's a tea party, that little mice are having a tea party, and this is one cake. And then I would say, like, the mouse invited 9 friends, so there's 10 mice, and they're going to cut it into 10 strips. And then I would show them the rod and say, this is 1/10, and we can either write it as a fraction or we can write it as a decimal. I just modeled all of that, and then I went through the hundredths. And then I showed them how you write it. It was like a whole lesson about how you model all of this. And some people might think 5th graders don't need that. Yes, most of them actually do, because then when you do comparing decimals and things, you get those manipulatives out, and then it starts all making sense. So it really is important to build that foundation. And if you're thinking, oh, I don't know how I would possibly have time to do this, I can't get through everything, and at the end of the year, there's no time to review. Well, what I found out was, when you teach decimals this way, you don't really have to do a lot of review at the end of the year, because they get it. Like, they understand it, it makes sense, they remember it. So a lot of times I dragged behind my coworkers. Like, I was a little behind them on our timeline, but then at the end, I was continuing to teach right on, I'm not going to say right up to the day of the state test, but I'm just saying, like, I didn't start reviewing in December. You know, I kept teaching. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind, that you have to adjust your pacing. Another activity that I really like is using the Gallon robot fraction model. And what I love about Gallon robot, you may have heard Gallon man, you know, Gallon gal, or whatever. It's the same concept, but I just made into Gallon robot. What I really like about this model is that it works with fractions and measurement. So when I designed this pattern, I designed the 1 gallon unit, that pink unit, to be a certain size, which is pretty much a full sheet of paper. And then I designed the quarts so that 4 quarts fit into that gallon, and then 8 pints fit into that, and then the 16 cups. And when you first cut the whole thing out and you have the kids cut it out, you could do it like 1 per team if you don't want to do it 1 per person, but you actually do a fraction lesson with this before they make their Gallon robot. So I have these patterns, and then I actually have these visuals that I created. I like to make things easy for teachers. I like to save you time. And so I've got these visuals you can put up on your whiteboard that really helps you explain what everything means. So I broke it down this way, and then actually have something that they can take home to their parents, and they can kind of like let their parents quiz them and talk to them about how Gallon robot works. Now, I know many people use the big G model. You draw a big G on a piece of paper. I'm not going to go into that right now. And that's, you know, that's fine, like, and that's an easy one to remember, but it doesn't really show the fractional relationships, and that's why I like the Gallon robot. And I have a funny little story to tell about this. When my older daughter was in 3rd grade, her teacher taught her about Gallon man or Gallon robot. And I think that might be the first time that I heard about it too. And the whole way it fits together, she related it, her teacher, Wendy's teacher, related it to like her body parts. So when the kids would talk about the gallon, you know, point to your gallon, then they'd point to their tummies, point to your quarts, and then you would point to your like upper arms and upper, you know, thighs. And those bones are bigger. That's a single bone. But then when you point to your pints, you can kind of feel the bones, that there's like 2 little bones that make up that lower part of your arm, and so on. So you can, and then you just tuck your thumb under to show your cups. So they can relate it to their bodies as well after learning the fractions. And I would see kids on the end of grade test, like they would be doing the measurement problems, and they'd be kind of like pointing to their bodies, you know, to try to help figure it out. But anyways, back to the little story. Wendy was in 3rd grade, but she just picked this up immediately. And I've always, like most adults even, you know, you forget like how many cups are in a gallon and how many pints are in a quart and all, you know, it's confusing. But after you learn this, you don't forget it anymore. So we were on the way home from school one day, and I said, Wendy, let's trick your dad tonight, because you know, I was quizzing her. I was saying, okay, Wendy, how many cups in 3 quarts? And she could just you know, just give me the answer almost immediately. And how many quarts are in 2 gallons or whatever? She could just answer it. She was in 3rd grade, but she was thinking of this model. I said, we're going to trick your dad. We'll ask him to kind of go up against you in some questions about you know, capacity measurement. She's like, yeah, let's do that. So we did that at dinner, and I started asking questions like, okay, how many cups are in 4 pints? And then Wendy would just come out with the answer. And after a couple of times, her dad was like, okay, what's going on here? So we taught it to him. But it was a lot of fun. And, you know, it's just one of those things that the kids don't forget. Okay, another way to deepen that understanding is with a Frayer model. This is a free printable on that Freebies page. I took the basic Frayer model. Many of you are probably familiar with it, with it's a graphic organizer used for vocabulary, and I adapted a little bit for math so that it had the opportunity to do the illustration or the picture. So here's an example. If you are introducing the word triangle, after the kids have done some activities and maybe as sort of a summary activity at the end of the lesson, you would go back through what are the characteristics, what are some pictures, what are some examples, non-examples, and so on. You're not going to have the kids do this time and time again. It's more like a teacher-directed activity, or maybe I've got some other options for you here. One thing that you could do is you could have the kids do it as a cooperative learning activity. So you could assign them a vocabulary word, like each kid on the team, like one person might do triangle, one person might do quadrilateral or whatever, and they prepare their Frayer model, and then when you direct the next part of the activity, you just say, like, person number one, introduce your polygon to your team, and they might say, like, oh, team, this is, meet my friend Triangle. Triangle is a three-sided polygon, and, and just go through as if they're introducing it and go around the team. I don't know, just something to make it, like, a little bit more fun for the kids. And the next idea I had for the Frayer model, and, this is me, like, I don't know, graphic organizers are great, but it's kind of that whole thing about powering up activities. When I see a graphic organizer, I think, okay, that's nice, but, like, what am I going to do with it that's going to get the kids engaged and make it a little bit more interesting than just, here, fill out this graphic organizer? So what if this could be like at the end of something like a geometry unit? What if you secretly assigned a vocabulary word to each student by number? So you let them know, like, you're number 3, and you secretly give them a card, you're quadrilateral or whatever. But on the Frayer model, they don't actually put the word. So they have those numbers there. And the student fills out the whole thing, but the number is missing, and then you could do a game of Scoot, or have them posted around the wall, or do a lot of different things where the kids write down the number and then they look at the whole Frayer model and they have to say what word they think it is. And probably a better way to do it would be if you provided, let's say you had 20 words you were doing. You could partner kids. Let's say you have 24 kids and you paired them up, and then so you did 12 words. So you could number a paper from 1 to 12 and then post them around the room and let the kids kind of go around with their partner and try to see if they can figure out what the words are, and maybe, like, number next to them. So, okay, see, I told you lots of, like, engaging things that you can do to build that vocabulary that really is, you're not going to have a lot of stuff that you got to take home and grade, and the kids are going to get it. So concept sorting is another, like, amazing thing. Kids really get concepts this way. So I like to have a large sheet of drawing paper, like 12 by 18 size, and on one side I did a Venn diagram, and then on the other side I did a T-chart, and then I laminated it. And then I was able to use dry erase markers or vis-a-vis markers on it, and I just kept a stack of them. So I had, I think I had one per team. You could do one for each 2 students. I don't think you really need to do one per person. And then for the sorting activity, you need some kind of a deck of cards, and each card has, like, a number, a word, a definition, an image, a sentence, just one concept. You could just do that on index cards, would be easy to do. When you're deciding and you're creating your activity, you do need to be aware of the difference between Venn diagrams and sorting. And I'm just kind of throwing this out because if you have never really put together an activity yourself, it can be kind of confusing unless you think through it ahead of time. So your Venn diagram categories have to overlap. And the T-chart categories are, like, separate. So you, like, on the Venn diagram, you would not want to put even on one side and odd on the other, because there'd be nothing in the middle. So you have to do something like even or multiples of 5, or prime and 2-digit numbers, quadrilaterals and polygons with parallel lines. But on your T-chart, you want them to be totally separate with no overlap. So you odd and even, quadrilaterals and triangles. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your own sorting activities. So let's take a look at a number sorting activity. So I've got this 50 number page that's on the Freebies page that you can get and print out and cut apart for the kids, or let the kids cut it apart, or you could cut them apart and laminate them. and then put them in a little Ziploc bag or whatever. But in this activity, the kids need to work with a partner, and the key thing is that before placing any number, each student explains his or her reason, and the other partner must agree. If they don't agree, they set the number aside for the time being, and then they come back to it at the end. So person number one would take like the number 8 and say, you know, I think it's even and it's not 2 digits, so it's going to go on the left. And then the other partner would take a number. They just go back and forth, but the key thing is that each time they do have to explain it, and the other person has to agree before it's placed. It's really important to do it that way, because if you just tell the kids, all right, work with your partner and sort these numbers out, when you come over to the desk to check it and there's something wrong, they're both going to point at each other and they're going to say, she did it, he did it, you know. But if you say you have to explain it and your partner has to agree, then when you go to them and something's wrong and they try to say, oh, that, you know, Mary did that one, you say, well, wait a minute, the rules said you had to agree, so I don't want to hear about anything about that, you know. Let's just talk about where it should go. Polygon sorting. Oh my goodness, this is so powerful. This is like, I know I had just another quick story about in the classroom. I wanted to do an activity during, we were doing, you know, testing that week, and I don't, they probably had the language, the reading test or something in the morning or whatever. I wanted to do an activity that was fun for the kids and not like paperwork, but still kind of keep their brains going. And so we did a Polygon sorting activity for like, oh my goodness, we kind of did it for like an hour or something. But it was really fun for the kids. I had them working in their teams, and then I had those laminated boards, and I would put up 2 qualities like right angle, or attributes, I guess, quadrilateral, and then they stacked up their shapes, and these were just cut out paper shapes, and then they took turns. Like person number one would pick up one of the shapes and would say, well, this, you know, this trapezoid has right angles, it's also a quadrilateral, it goes in the middle, and then everybody would give a thumbs up if they agreed. And then the next person would pick up the next one, and they would go, and there was like so much conversation about, you know, parallel and like convex and concave, and like I tried to use create Venn diagrams that went through and got them to use all of their vocabulary. So they had a blast doing this. And then what was really kind of funny was the next day when they had the math test, there was a lot of geometry. I mean, I've almost felt bad because I did not know that it was going to have that much vocabulary with geometry, but it did. And though the kids just, you know, that geometry section, it was almost embarrassing when I looked at my scores, like how well they did. You know, it's like, I hope nobody thinks that that I was helping during the test, but it wasn't. Obviously I wasn't, but it was because they had done all of this, and in order to sort something and justify it, you got to explain, you know, those attributes. It was great. So I do have a product. I mean, you don't have to buy a product for this, but this is something that will make it helpful. It's Polygon Explorations. And one thing that's nice about these pieces, I do have a game that's in there. I have directions. I have some sorting activities, but all of the pieces are numbered. And that was something that I've noticed in other activities. If you don't have the pieces numbered, it's really hard to check the answers. But what I would have the kids do is put the numbers upside down when they were doing the activity, and then they flip them all over, and then we would call out like, okay, on this side there's 3, 8, 2, or whatever. Another great activity for sorting is sorting area and perimeter word problems. You know, kids really have a hard time knowing the difference between area and perimeter. A lot of times kids know that when it comes to perimeter, you're going to add the numbers around the shape or the garden or whatever, and with area problems you're going to multiply, but they really don't know when they read the problem whether it's an area problem or a perimeter problem. So I came up with this worksheet, which is free on that Freebies page, where the kids first read the problem, and then they have to circle either A or P to identify if it's an area or a perimeter problem. And then they draw out the solution, like draw the garden or draw the wall or whatever, a diagram, and then work out the problem and put the answer. But a sorting activity would work really well here as kind of an intermediate activity, especially to help kids that are having trouble with this. You could have the kids cut these word problems apart and actually just cut out the word problem and not even have the bottom section there, and have them stack those little cards, word problem cards, face down. Work with a partner, one at a time, flip over the cards, and then read the problem aloud and decide, is it an area problem or is it a perimeter problem? And then they would just take turns sorting them as shown, and they wouldn't even have to write the answer or solve the problem at this point. They would mostly just be discussing it, sorting it, trying to figure out what strategies to use. And then after they sort the problems, they could just go back to their own desks or get out their own individual worksheet and do the problems independently. Sorting angles is another really good thing to do, having the kids justify use a protractor or like an index card that you can kind of stick the corner down in to show, is this a right angle, is this an acute, is it obtuse, or whatever. But that's another, this is another way to make sure that they're really getting this. And this Amazing Angles product has other high-level things that the kids do after they sort it. There's an activity where they, well, I won't go into details here, but it's sort of a creative and critical thinking activity that they do with their understanding of angles. So the third phase in learning vocabulary is now they got to practice the words and the meanings. And sometimes people look at this phase as being, well, this is just low-level memorization. But it's called fluency in reading, and we're really talking about fluency here, is that they need to know these things quickly so that they can retrieve that information when they need it. So one of the things I love is Plickers. I did 2 webinars on Plickers that are actually free on my website, and I'll give you links to those. But in the Plickers activity, in the second webinar that I did, I introduced a game that the kids did cooperative learning, and it was just a review activity. So that's something to check out. And then I'm going to share some of these others in a minute. One game that is really helpful when it comes to place value is something that's kind of played like Battleship. It's called Place Value Partners. And this one is one that can just stay in a center like pretty much all year long after you introduce it. But the neat thing about this game is the 2 partners have different directions. They're sitting facing each other with a file folder between them, and I just paper clip the top together so they can't see what the other student has, and then those yellow numbers that you see are actually like cut out movable pieces. So the sender, if you look at the sender's board, the sender has the places underneath, but the receiver, the person who's listening to the directions, does not have the places. So the sender might say, put your 5 in the tens place, and then they wait for a minute, the receiver says, okay, and they say, like, put your 8 in the hundred thousands place, and they'll pick up the 8 and put it there, whatever. And when they go through and do the entire, all of the numbers, then they take the paper clip off and they turn and compare their boards to see if they have the same answers. The sender and the receiver are doing this at the same time. So that is really effective, and the kids really like it a lot. So when I created this Place Value Partners game, I have decimal directions, and then I have various levels of play going down to, I think there's just 3-digit whole numbers for younger kids, and then there's the decimals. And then also, there are 2 variations of this game. One is a Common Core version, and the other one is the traditional one. So the one you see pictured here says CCSS Math, but actually in the same product you get both of them, because there's the Common Core has some very strange terminology, just different from what I had been using when I was teaching. So I put both variations in there. Another activity is very simple. You can use it with any pretty much any worksheet, you may have to adapt it. These are free worksheets on my site, but you can just take just about any worksheet and adapt it, and I'll tell you how you can do that. But this one is where the students are working with a partner that you've assigned them a partner, and they have one piece of paper. So if you look at the decimal activity, partner A, one person writes their name there, partner B, and then they take turns reading the number aloud. Like A would say 2 55/100ths, and he or she would write the number on the line, and then B would put a check mark if they agree. And if B does not agree, then they would say, this is, you teach them the social skills, like, are you sure that's hundredths? Because you have 3 places after the decimal, and I thought that was thousandths, or whatever. And then they're allowed to erase it and correct it, because this is not something you would grade. Remember, I said you don't need to grade all of this. This is cooperative learning practice, and then you give them a quiz or something later. And they just take turns, and they go down the whole page. And then, like I said, when you're walking around and you're monitoring, when you look at it, if you see a mistake, they can't say, well, that was what she did, because it's kind of like, okay, but that's your check mark next to it, so you checked it. So they stop saying that. They start paying more attention. With the partner angle practice activity, this one, they first look at it and they write down at the bottom, like they're taking turns, but like person A, or partner 1 in this case, might look at A and say, that's an acute angle. Then they estimate it to the nearest 5 degrees. So I don't know, I'm out of practice, so I don't know, maybe that's like 35 or 40 degrees or whatever. They estimate it. And they actually go down, actually no, they take turns. So then the other person measures it and writes what the actual measurement is, and then they take turns down the page. But believe me, this is like the easiest way to get kids to practice measuring with a protractor, because I think that's one of the hardest skills to teach. With one teacher in the classroom, every hand is up in the air. I know the first time I taught the kids how to measure with a protractor, I thought I was just going to pull my hair out. They could not work independently. It was like one kid knew how to do it, and every single kid other than that was having trouble. But when I switched to doing partners, they could work with each other and figure a lot out while I worked my way around the classroom. So the next thing is simple memory matching games, and this is a freebie with different quadrilateral types on that page. And the thing about these matching games, if you teach the kids that when they turn over a card, before they go pick up the match, they have to say what they're looking for. So if they pick up square, then they have to say, well, I'm looking for a quadrilateral that has 4 right angles and that all the sides are the same length. And then it makes them think, so they're not just sitting there silently flipping them over, match, no, that doesn't match, that kind of thing. And they have to justify it to their partner about why they get to keep the cards. And then in my customary measurement conversions pack, I have a bunch of different little matching things. So just to be clear, I'm not saying that you should teach measurement this way. This is not teaching measurement. Like, kids need to measure hands-on, like with the gallon robot. That's not how you teach measurement. First, the kids have stations set up, and they're actually measuring cups and pints and quarts, and it's hands-on activity. So I did not ever mean to imply that you teach it by gallon robot. But even after the kids understand what the units mean by doing hands-on activities, and maybe they've used the rulers and they've done those things, sometimes they just need to review and practice and just get really fluent with them. And speaking of fluency, the fourth strategy is to use math vocabulary fluently. So have the kids play games that require knowledge of math vocabulary and concepts. Have them read and solve word problems. They need to think and reason logically, communicate effectively about math. This is all in that final stage of them using that math vocabulary fluently. So the mystery number game kind of is at that higher level of practice. Another game that's really awesome is Classify It, which is for exploring quadrilaterals. I put a lot of thought into this game, and I had some teachers field testing it with me, practicing it, tweaking the directions, because this is another skill that's so challenging for kids, because you can't just teach them to memorize the definitions. They have to really be able to apply those definitions. And when they play this game, they have to, there's actually a practice phase, and then there's the game. But in the actual game, they put a task card in the block like that, 3, and then they take turns going around. Is that a parallelogram? Is it a trapezoid? Is it a rhombus? And so the different colors of the cards represent different students. It's a little bit complex at first, but third graders, fourth and fifth, they can all play it. And the teachers that field tested it said that they just could not believe how after just one day of playing this game, their kids just knew those attributes of those shapes. They just knew them, because they had to keep justifying it over and over in the game. So anyways, this is how this looks. And then I do have black and white. Most everything I do now, I do create the black and white variations of it for people who want that. Oh, the other thing is, the reason I want to show you this picture is, if you have your kids play this game, make sure you have rulers and protractors available, because part of the game is justifying and proving that it's a parallelogram or not. Sometimes you need to measure with your ruler to show that the lines are parallel, or is it really a right angle for that rectangle or whatever. So those are tools that should be available. Here's a couple of freebies on my website, this dynamic data game. This is a great way to get kids to understand range, mode, median, and mean. And there's 2 variations of this game. This was actually created by a colleague of mine, Sue Moody, and she allowed me to I probably did some of the formatting on it, but it was her game concept, and I put it on my website years ago, and it's been free for a long time. But there's game directions. Basically, kids are drawing these little cards, and then they spin to find out whether they're going to have to find the median, mean, range, mode, or whatever. And then there's a second part to this game where they're kind of covering up numbers on a playing board. It's just what I'm saying, like vocabulary. If games and things like this that require kids to use the vocabulary will do so much more than just plain, drill and kill type practice. This strategy is another one. This is going to be if you're upper elementary or middle school, this will be like a go-to strategy for you. The younger kids, probably not so much, even though you might be able to pull some elements of it. But this is called Recharge and Write, and I've got the free directions on that freebies page, and this cute little label here that's the recharger is also free. So the way this activity works is that, let me skip to the next page. Oh, let me just share that for this activity, you need the directions, but you also need a problem-solving worksheet. And it's really good if it has a place for the kids to work out the problems or show their work. And the Daily Math Puzzler worksheets are perfect for this type of activity, and this is also free on that page. But let me kind of walk you through the directions. So in a team of 4 students, all the kids have a can in the middle of the team. It's called a recharger because when the kids put their pencils inside the cup, that's when they are allowed to talk. And they discuss the word problem, and you just tell them, while you're talking, your pencils are recharging. But then after they talk over the problem, so like person number 1, team member number 1 would read this first problem. Pablo has 16 socks in his drawer. There are 6 black socks and the rest are white. How many pairs of each color does he have? Each student would have their own copy of this worksheet. But before anybody can write anything, they talk about how are they going to solve the problem? What are they going to do? What are some things they need to remember to do? And then the leader says, is everybody ready to write their answer? And if everybody says yes, they pick up their pencil, and then without talking, they draw out their solution and write it and solve it or whatever. And they don't check it. They don't correct it after that. The recharge and write, the kids are doing their own work and they're not copying what the other person has. They get a chance to talk about it before, but that's it. Then they put their pencils back in the cup, and then person number 2 reads the next problem. they talk about it. When everybody's ready, they pick up their pencil and then they write without talking. So all the directions are on there, but this can be used in social studies and science and really anywhere that the kids need to write or explain, and it's kind of higher level. And it is such a great strategy for them to really generate some ideas. It's a really great, I wouldn't call it differentiating, because it's you can differentiate by, you could have the kids seated in different groups and give them different levels of problems, but if everybody's doing the same thing, it's more like a scaffolding type activity because it gives them some help while they're trying to figure out what to do. And then of course you don't do this for every single activity, so you do this one time and then the next time it's an independent worksheet, but this definitely helps kids who have trouble with problem solving. Okay, that wraps up the 4 phases of math vocabulary development. I've just shared a number of different ways that you can power up vocabulary development and vocabulary instruction in all of these different phases. Right now you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed with your note-taking, but I just wanted to bring these up and sort of recap some of the things we've covered. We've gone through why teach math vocabulary, the Power Up Learning Matrix, 6 ways to power up Guess My Number, and I'm hoping those are things that you will use in other areas too. And then we just went through those 4 phases of math vocabulary development and a lot of different strategies for each one. So it's time to take a moment and think, what is the most important thing that you've done? What are your next steps? What have you learned that you want to implement right away? And hopefully there's a lot of strategies here that you'll be able to pick some and move ahead with those in your instruction. And I will be sending you to the Freebies page in just a minute, but I wanted to answer a question that you might be thinking right now if you gave up on taking notes because things were moving a little quickly. You might be wondering, where can I get the replay? And the answer to that is, it is available in my TPT store. And when you purchase the replay version of this webinar, you get an HD quality video recording that is actually played off of my website. You can just play it online, and you can also download it for offline viewing. There are PDF handouts of the webinar slides, which are definitely handy when you're trying to keep up with a presentation and take notes. And there's also links to all the freebies, including the webinar notes pages and the professional development certificate. And that webinar recording will be hosted on, it's actually on YouTube, and that is subject to change. It's at an unlisted link on YouTube, but it plays through a private page on my website, and you can either watch it there or you can open it up to full screen and make sure that the HD settings are enabled so it looks really sharp and crisp. The webinar replay is also a part of the Math Vocabulary Building Bundle, and I've already shared a number of the resources with you that are in that bundle, but I wanted to quickly go back through how those different resources can be used. So going back to our 4 phases of math vocabulary development, you may have noticed on the right-hand side of those slides, I went through the steps: the discover new math vocabulary, deepen understanding, practicing and using math vocabulary fluently. Each one of those strategies that I shared, over to the side, it told what step that went with, what phase that went with. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly go back through some of the products that are available to you if you would like to purchase them. Of course, there's plenty of freebies you can use, but the products go into this in a little more detail. They provide instructions for you and really just make it a little bit easier for you to implement. So word wall cards, create your own word wall cards, is my newest product, and that is perfect for that first phase where you're introducing math vocabulary. And this product is very simple, but it's very powerful because you can make up your own word wall cards. You don't have to buy a pack of 500 of them and then you only use a few of them. You can customize the fonts, you can customize the backgrounds, and I also included step-by-step instructions to tell you exactly what to do. And this is not just for math. I mean, you can use it in any area, but it's definitely a tool that you would want to have. One that I did not mention is the ebook, Exploring Basic Fraction Concepts, as a part of my Penguin Fractions series. And this one's great also for introducing vocabulary, in particular fraction vocabulary. I have some teacher pages at the beginning of the product that guide you through how you would introduce words like numerator, denominator, how you say a fraction, and so on. And this particular product is kind of neat because there are fraction cards that have the fractions on one side with the fraction on the penguin's tummies, and then you can print fraction bars on the back. So when you're doing activities with your students, if they need to flip the cards over and have a visual of what the fractional part is, it's right there for them. So that's a perfect way to introduce fraction vocabulary. I did mention the Gallon Robot to the Rescue product, and if you notice to the right-hand side of this slide, it is actually for not only practicing, but also for that deepening understanding, which is step 2, and then practicing, and then also fluency, because there's some games or some activities, there's some discussion cards, and when you go through all of the activities, your kids will be very comfortable with these customary capacity units. These are some of the geometry concept sorting activities I have available. I already showed you the Amazing Angles activity, and Polygon Explorations comes in a smartboard version that actually has the shapes so that you can guide your kids through that lesson. The Classify It Exploring Quadrilaterals activity I shared with you, and then my book Geometry Exploring the Basics also has some sorting activities. More ways to practice and build fluency. I shared with you about place value partners. One game that I have not mentioned is area and perimeter tic-tac-toe. This is a fun game. It plays like tic-tac-toe, but there are task cards that go with it that have shapes, and the task cards don't say whether they're supposed to find the area or the perimeter. The kids have to flip a coin to find out, am I going to find the area of this or the perimeter of this? And that activity, as I said, is area and perimeter tic-tac-toss. Has the game board, or you can just have the kids do it on a dry erase board. There are metric measurement cards and regular measurement cards that don't have metric units. Another product for building fluency and for practicing is customary measurement conversions. There are foldables, task cards for discussion, word problems, and even quizzes in that activity. So those are all things that can help you. And finally, I've got 2 mystery activities, mystery number that I already shared with you, and mystery vocabulary detectives. So mystery number detectives has all of these pieces. Mystery vocabulary detectives is a little different because the kids are trying to guess particular words rather than numbers. The rules are a little bit different, so you need to, if you use this product, you need to make sure that you discuss the rules with your kids. It has a similar look and feel, but the rules are slightly different. And it does come with editable template, so you can add your own vocabulary words. And it's actually not just a math product. It's something that you can use in any subject area. So all of those resources, there are 13 of them, are in this math vocabulary building bundle. And if you purchased all of those separately, it would be $87.25. But the bundle discount is 30% off, bringing it down to $59.95. So it's something that you might want to consider. If all of these things are not something that you could use, then each thing is available individually. But if they are products that you don't already have and you would like to have, the bundle discount is definitely the way to go. One thing I love about bundles too is once you pay for a bundle, no matter what the price is, when I add things to it, you can get the new things for free. Some of my bundles started out at like under $10, and now they're like over $40 because I keep adding to them and then the price goes up. So I am planning to add at least one more item to this one, and that is some area and perimeter cards for sorting. Okay, we are down to the freebies page here, and this has the freebies. It has links to the resources that I've shared when you go to this page. You will find the professional development certificate there. Now, it's not filled out for you. You do have to fill it out yourself, and it's something that you just have to check with your administrator to see if he or she will accept it. I would say that if you took notes throughout this presentation, if you submit it with your notes, maybe there's a good chance that they would accept that certificate for continuing education credit. So the Freebies URL, I would suggest that you write this down, by the way, because after this presentation ends, you won't be able to get back to this page. So see if you can grab a pencil real quickly. I'm going to just leave it up here for a few minutes and not end the presentation to give you plenty of time to write it down. So if you have your handout, it's written on your handout at the bottom of the third page. I've already written out lauracandler.com/webinars/math vocabulary, all lowercase. And if you type that in, it should take you to this freebies page. And not only freebies, but there are other resources. And I do have the link to the bundle that I described is on this page if you're interested in that. Thanks for attending this presentation. We've covered a lot of ground, and if you've made it all the way to the end, then I know that you are the kind of teacher who cares about your kids. You care about ensuring that they have the math vocabulary in place that they need to be successful. And be sure to head over there to the freebies page. I wish you all the best with your vocabulary instruction.